Hi there, my name is Bill Brewa. I'm a chef instructor at the Culinary Institute of America in California's Napa Valley. Since this campus's inception in 1996, the food and the cooking of the Mediterranean have been an important part of our curriculum. When we opened our doors to the public, our campus restaurant served Mediterranean food to hungry guests, and it helped us prove to the community that what we taught here was popular with people out in the industry. It sort of begs the question, what exactly is Mediterranean food? Well, we all have some sense of geography. Likely we have the romantic notion of sleepy fishing villages and blue water. It's entirely possible that over the years we've even visited the Mediterranean. But it doesn't take much digging to realize that the countries that rim the Mediterranean basin could not be more different from one another. So as an example, Italy is not Greece. Spanish paella is not Turkish pilaf. And spaghetti carbonara bears almost no resemblance to Moroccan couscous, even though both of them could rightly be called pasta dishes. Over the lessons that make up this course, we'll explore the countries that are the fabric of the Mediterranean, and we'll try to identify the common threads woven into that fabric. We'll cook iconic dishes, we'll explore cooking traditions, techniques, and ingredients, and we'll tease apart the flavor profiles of this food so that you can approach Mediterranean food with more understanding and hopefully with more confidence. So, as an exercise, I thought it would be valuable for us to see what we could learn by cooking our way through some of the many small dishes that populate menus around the Mediterranean. So this first dish is called Pinchos Morenos, or skewered food in the style of the Moors. It is grilled pork, and I'm going to put together a real quick marinade. The marinade is distinctive because it has exotic spices in it. And the exotic spices, I'm going to identify them right here and now, include curry powder, a little bit of cumin. I've got some cinnamon here, coriander, and then finally paprika. So all those spices go in there. I'm going to add some garlic as well. And then by way of liquid, first orange juice, followed by some lemon juice, and then finally olive oil. And we'll stir this together. And that's the marinade for this dish. We're going to put this marinade on pork. And I want to tell you a little bit about this as we go. I'm going to take and skewer a piece of pork. This is pork tenderloin, very, very tender cut of meat. And I'm going to put a grape on there and then another piece of meat, and we'll carry on that way until all of these skewers are full. This is a tapa, a small dish from Spain, and it's probably one of the most popular. It's a national treasure, if you will. Now, a little history lesson is that in 1492, when Columbus was busy discovering America, the Spaniards won their independence from the Moors, from North Africa. And they had ruled Spain for about 700 years. And in that time, they brought a tremendous amount to Spain. Agriculture, architecture, commerce, astronomy, you name it. And in terms of culinary influences, the exotic spices from the Middle and Far East were brought along. So this dish, the one that we're tasting here, probably would have been eaten originally by the Moors on lamb because they have a religious prohibition against the consumption of pork. Now, when the Moors were forced out of Spain and the Spaniards won their independence, I can only imagine they were hungry. And when they decided what to be eating, somebody said, hey, how about that great skewered meat with the exotic spices? How terrific would that be? And then, of course, somebody said, wait a second. We just got rid of those guys and you want to eat their food? You want to celebrate them by eating their food? Oh, yeah, I understand. And then they came up with a brilliant idea, and that was, what would happen if we took their spices and put it on a meat that they would never dream of eating? And Pinchos Morenos was born. So we're going to take these skewers, and what I want to do is spoon this marinade over the top. If they could sit in this marinade for 20 minutes or a half an hour, so much the better. But we're going to press forward here. So the exotic spices of this dish are the ones that the Moors brought with them from the near and far east. They made their way across North Africa by camel caravan, and then they crossed the Straits of Gibraltar and brought those same spices into Spain. So Spain is one of the few northern tier countries where they use exotic spices like this in their savory food. Once this meat has marinated, we're going to cook it. And I have a hot grill here. You could cook this outdoors over the grill. That would work as well. The heat feels pretty good. I'm going to take and off we go. So when you're grilling meat like this, oftentimes you put it on the grill and initially the meat will stick to the grill. It's a good idea not to try and wrestle it free, but instead just let it sit and cook a little bit. As it cooks, what will happen is some of the fat will rise to the surface, and also the meat fibers will constrict or pull back, and as they do, they will pull themselves free of the grill. And then you should be able to turn this pretty easily. Let's take a look and see where we're at. All right, we're off and running. So I just turned the heat off underneath this plaque, or plancha as they call it in Spain, and these are delicious. They're cooked all the way through. They've got some nice browning on them. They smell great. Those exotic spices really lend a lot. I'm going to take and put just a little bit of chopped parsley on the top, and those will be ready to serve. A rustic dish like this, I think, benefits from some coarsely chopped parsley. And maybe just a little drizzle of fresh lemon juice. All right, there you have it. Pinchos Morenos. It smells great. The exotic spices that the Moors brought from North Africa with the meat, pork, that Spaniards love. This little juxtaposition of one area and another is really what Mediterranean food is all about. And that's what we're going to explore as this course unfolds. Next, I'd like to make a brandade of salt cod. You'll find this in the south of France often, but you'll also find salt cod eaten in Spain. You'll find it eaten in Italy. You'll find it eaten in Greece. It's a very, very popular fish. As a way of preserving fish, filleting it and salting it, it was tremendously practical. In Greece, they called it mountain fish because this was really the only fish that you could eat if you were living away from the coast. The fish is taken from the bone and then it's heavily salted until it's pretty firm. And you can buy it in sides like this. You can also find it in 1 pound boxes. My experience is that the ones that come in boxes maybe have sat around for a while. You can see this starting to discolor just a little bit. So if you could find a nice, pristine white side of salt cod like this, I think that would be my preference. If you look at this, the first thing that you want to do is rinse it to get the salt off of the outside. So let me take care of that. I'm going to take it over here to the sink and we'll rinse all the loose salt off the outside. And then I'm going to bring this back over here, and it needs to be soaked. And typically it has to soak for almost 24 hours. And you want to cover it in water and then put it into the refrigerator and likely change the water 3 or 4 times across that 24 hours. Here's a piece that I've had soaked for 24 hours right now, and it sort of blossoms. I've changed the water a couple of times. And if you taste it, and this is like tasting a piece of cured meat, it shouldn't be overly salty. If it's overly salty, then it needs to be soaked for even longer. So let me set this back here for right now. The really interesting thing about salt cod is that salt cod, while it's popular all around the Mediterranean, most of it comes from the Americas. So the Basque fishermen on the Atlantic coast of the Iberian Peninsula were sailing all the way across the Atlantic. Some people believe even before Columbus discovered the Americas, and they were fishing off the maritime states of New England and Canada. Along the way, they learned the technique of salting fish from the Scandinavians. And as popular as it is, it's also important because this was one of the reasons that open sea exploration could take place, because now suddenly you had a dependable supply of protein that you could take with you even if the fishing wasn't good. What I've done with that soaked salt cod is I've poached it in milk. And if there's any fishiness left, poaching it in milk will make it sweeter still. I have some that is poached right here, and you know it's done when it flakes apart easily. And the reason I have gloves on is I want to flake this apart, and I want to keep my eye open for anything objectionable, any bones, any skin. This seems to be really beautiful salt cod, and so I'm not finding anything in here that I have a problem with. But it's worth the effort to do that. So I'm going to take this and put it right into a food processor. In addition, I have here some shallots and some garlic that I sautéed very, very gently until they were aromatic and translucent. I did that in olive oil, and I'm going to take and add that to the food processor as well. Now, a real quick story. I used to work in a restaurant that served salt cod fritters, and one evening, one particular table had salt cod fritters 3 times in a row. And when the third order came in, I went out to see who liked salt cod that much, and it turned out to be an old Italian gentleman. And he said, "You did a masterful job. You reminded me of my childhood where every Friday we would have salt cod." But he said, "Let me tell you that my mother, Wednesday afternoon, would take an entire side of salt cod, like the one I showed you, and she would carry it into the bathroom, lift the tank from the lid from the tank of the toilet, and put the salt cod in so that each time the toilet would be flushed, the water would change. And then she would cook it Friday morning in milk, just as I'm doing here." That's creativity. All right, we're going to puree this cod, and it won't take very long. It's all tender already. It'll go very, very quickly. What you'll notice is that it's a little bit fibrous now, a little bit fibrous. And so the next step is to add some potatoes to this. Now these are cooked russet potatoes, and I'm going to put sort of an equal quantity of potatoes and salt cod, and I'm going to puree that as well. But once the potatoes go in, I would suggest just pulsing it, because too much activity can make potatoes turn gluey. And then I'm going to introduce some cream, and we're going to take this and make it light, almost a mousse-like consistency. So In some ways, it feels almost like I'm making mashed potatoes. And I'm going to give it a quick taste. The salt, no problem. I can taste the garlic and the shallots. I'm going to put a little bit of pepper, or if you have it, espelette pepper. This is a great Spanish pepper that is oftentimes used in this dish. It's not too hot, but it lends a nice color and a nice flavor. And again, when I tasted it, it's still a little bit rich because of all the cream, so I'm going to add a squeeze of lemon juice to this as well. And that is done. You know, for its humble roots, it really tastes pretty refined. The way we're going to serve it is put it into a gratin dish. And I've got some fresh breadcrumbs. I'm going to put just a little bit of olive oil on them. And we'll toss them together. I want that oil to soak into the breadcrumbs. And then we will top this with breadcrumbs and put it into the oven at about 375 degrees. And within about 10 minutes or so, what you'll see is that it'll come out piping hot and the crumbs will be golden on the top. All right, off to the oven. So it's been about 12 minutes. Let's take a peek. All right. And we'll whisk it over here. It looks great. The crumbs have browned and it's just begun to souffle a little bit. I think a little bit of parsley over the top. And that's ready to be served. So, salt cod, a really important ingredient in the Mediterranean, maybe even in the world. And you take it to your table with a couple of olive oil toasts and a glass of wine, and you've got a really authentic Mediterranean appetizer. So next I'd like to make some dolmas. Dolmas are stuffed grape leaves, and you'll find them in Greece certainly, but also into Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean. Before we get started, let me just tell you that if you were to take and draw a line north to south across the Mediterranean, sort of falling between Italy and Greece, to the east of that line, rice is a pretty big deal. They eat a lot of rice on that part of that line. And if you go to the west of that line, you see a lot more wheat in the form of bread or pasta. And when you're trying to understand the difference between one culture's cuisine and the next, it's an important idea to see how it is that they sustain themselves, see what carbohydrate they've hitched their wagon to. So certainly in the Eastern Mediterranean, you may find stuffed grape leaves that are stuffed with wheat, with bulgur wheat, but I think this is a pretty traditional recipe. So let's get started here. First thing I want to do is cook some onions and garlic. In some hot oil. And I don't really want to color these, so once they're up and running, I'll turn the temperature down just a hair. I want to cook them until the onions are translucent. And that's my guarantee that all the harsh, sulfurous compounds that some people find burning on their palate have been driven off, and there's a sweetness that comes out of onions that have been cooked like that. You know, it's not by accident that recipes start with the onions first. You deal with that harsh sulfurous quality and then you move on. These are diced up small enough that already they're starting to turn translucent, and they begin to smell a little bit sweet. And so that's my clue that it's time to move on. In goes some garlic. And as soon as I can smell that garlic, that's enough cooking. I've got some ground lamb here, and it's not a huge amount. I would say 4 or 5 ounces of ground lamb, and we're going to brown it. An idea that I'd like to share with you is simply this, that this lamb in this dish, this is a grape leaf stuffed with rice, but the lamb is there more as a condiment or a flavoring agent. This is not grape leaves stuffed with lamb, it's grape leaves stuffed with rice, and the lamb just lends a certain amount of flavor and depth. Okay, the meat is just about cooked. I have 2 spices. Now, Greece is very close to the Eastern Mediterranean. It is elbow to elbow with Turkey, and in Turkey is the terminus of some of the camel caravans that made their way from the near, middle, and far east and brought exotic spices. And so those exotic spices sort of spilled over into Greek cuisine as well. By the time you get even as far west as Italy and then up into Northern Europe, exotic spices are really relegated to baking and not really put into savory food. Anyhow, what I have here is allspice and cinnamon, and I'm going to add both of those, and just a little simmer in this hot fat will bring those spices to life. Already I can smell them. And I'm going to turn that burner off. So let's make this filling. This is really where it begins, but I've got some components of this that are not cooked. Here's some rice. This is long grain rice, and what I want to do is soak it for a half an hour to an hour. It can be a little challenging to get the rice cooked once it's wrapped in the grape leaves, so this starts the process of the rice softening. Let me drain off the water. And in goes the rice. Then I'm going to add the meat, the onions, the garlic, the spices. I wish you were here because this smells so good. The allspice and the cinnamon in particular just fill this room. Now, in quick succession here, take a look. Some chopped tomatoes go in. I've got some pine nuts. I'm going to add those as well. And those have been browned a little bit, either in the oven or on top of the stove in a small amount of oil. Here is currants, and I've just allowed those to plump up in a little bit of hot water. So currants go in. I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice. And then I have 3 different herbs. And let me just tell you what they are. I've got dill, I've got parsley, and I've got mint. So those are all chopped up, and I'm going to add all 3 of them to this preparation. And we'll stir that together. I probably should season it with a little bit of salt and some pepper. We want to be a little bit careful. Once the rice is soaked, it's possible to break it. And I'd like the rice grains to be whole. So take that long grain rice and just be a little bit careful with it. And that's all there is to this filling. All right, so there's our filling done. Now we're going to stuff these into grape leaves. If you had a grapevine outside your house, you could go out and strip some leaves from the vine, but you can also find jarred grape leaves, and I have some here. I'm going to lay them out on the table, and I think the easiest way to do this is just to lay a lot of them out. This recipe will make about 30, 35 grape leaves. So I lay them all out ahead of time, divvy up the filling, and then roll them. I just want you to notice that these come from the jar with a little bit of the stem attached, and I'm sort of holding on to it right here. it's not a bad idea to take a pair of scissors and just snip those off because they tend to be a little bit tough. Okay, so snip them off and we're ready to go. I'm going to take a tablespoon and I'm going to grab this filling and I'm going to divide it up among these grape leaves. Now, one caution, and that is simply that when this rice begins to cook, it will swell. And so you don't want to overstuff these grape leaves. You can expect this to swell by half again as much. So exercise a little bit of restraint here. I would say that's, just a little bit less than a tablespoon, and that's plenty for our purposes. And just go around. If you see any big chunks of meat, just break them up so that everybody gets a little bit. And then what we're going to do is bring the bottom of the leaf up and over the filling, just like that. And then fold the edges in over the filling, just like that. And then finally roll it up and we're good to go. Again, bring the ends in. And I would just line these up over, bring the ends in. I would say if you have torn grape leaves or grape leaves that are very small, set them aside and don't try and use them as a wrapper because it's an exercise in frustration. Take the nice big grape leaves for wrapping. If you're lucky enough to have fresh grape leaves, you can use them certainly, but you'll have to blanch them in boiling salted water until they become a little bit tender, as they won't roll as easily as these jarred grape leaves. All right, so there's a number of them. I'm going to roll the rest of them, and then I'll show you the next step. So there's all of our grape leaves rolled. I'm going to cook these in a shallow dish. They actually poach in a vegetable or a chicken stock. And so I've got a nice shallow dish right here. What I want to do is line that dish with some of the smaller or the torn grape leaves if you have them. If all you've got are perfect grape leaves, then by all means use those. And what this will do is it will kind of protect the grape leaves, keep them from moving around too much in the boiling liquid because they're captured or held in place by these grape leaves. So line this pan just as I'm doing here. And I'm going to begin to lay these things out all the way around the outside with the seam down. I want to do everything I can to keep these from unfurling while they cook. So the seam where it overlaps, put that down. Let me stop there, and I'll tell you why. You may discover that you have almost enough, but not enough to fill a pan. I've got a big empty area here in the middle. To hold those in place, it might not be a bad idea just to get a plate, a small plate that will fit right in there, and that will keep those from moving around. All right, finally, I want to cover these with more grape leaves. And as I said, the grape leaves will kind of hold them in place as they're cooking. So we're going to cook these in stock, and I have some hot chicken stock over here. Vegetable stock would be appropriate as well. I'm going to put some herbs in here. There's a couple of branches of thyme and a bay leaf, and I'm going to squeeze in some lemon juice. But really what I'd like you to think about is that we've seasoned the filling here. How much of a shame would it be if, after we worked so hard on seasoning the filling, if we put it into a liquid that was not properly seasoned? This broth would rob the flavor from the grape leaves. So what I want you to do is season this almost as though you're thinking of it as soup. The lemon is great in there. The flavor of the herbs is coming out. A little bit of salt and pepper. And that's good to go. We bring this back over to the heat. And then finally, we take this hot liquid and we want to add enough so that the grape leaves are completely covered with liquid. And that looks just about right. This then gets brought to a simmer. You turn it down and maintain the barest simmer with a lid on top, and you can either cook it on top of the stove or oftentimes just to free up some space. I put it into the oven at about 350 degrees and I give it about an hour to cook. And you know they're done if you cut one open and the rice on the inside is tender. So what I have here is dolmas that have been cooked already. This will look a little familiar. Here's the grape leaves on the top. And I'm going to take those and discard them. I've already drained off the braising liquid, and you can save that. You can add it to a soup. You can use it to make dolmas again at another point in the future. It will only be tastier for having been used to cook these grape leaves. I'm going to take these plates out, and let's just take a grape leaf or two. Now, you can enjoy these a couple of different ways. Sometimes I like to eat them hot, in which case I may make a little sauce of the braising liquid. Other times I like to eat them cold like this. More often I eat them cold, I think. And having a little yogurt sauce to go with them is a nice idea. Even a little drizzle of olive oil is almost enough. So there you have dolmas, just the way you might find them in a taverna in Greece, stuffed with rice, but don't be surprised if in the Eastern Mediterranean you find them stuffed with bulgur wheat.